Hello, I am Seamless, and today is Wednesday, which means it's time for a new viewer track review video. And today we're going to begin it with Zyunia Wahliminate. And I have turned up the level relative to my voice, so it should be quite a bit more upfront for you. Let's do this. Man, I am conflicted about this track because there's a lot about it that I like in sound design and rhythm wise, but then there's some decisions and choices baffle me. So, for example, in main drop land, let's go to the first guy. This stuff. So as you can see, this clack is tripping. Yes, this track is clipping a lot. And it's an MP3, at least I think it is. I don't remember actually what the file is, but it kind of looks like MP3B. But what I'm gonna get at is that there's some clipping happening, and I'm pretty sure it's these dudes, these like pingy businesses happening up here, because we can hear them, I pretty well see them. Thank you, phone. I'm already doing it. We can pretty well see them happening, like even at this level, like they are among the very the brightest things. And those things, I really hope the levels on these two, my voice in the song isn't that disparate, but it's probably better than last time. the ultimate point is they're clipping a lot, and I think this contributing to losing significant amount of like impact on what there could be on these moments. This track, though, would go hard. Like, this is what I like about it. This track actually would go really, really well. And just about every other part but what's happening on the main moment. Like, these fill moments. Awesome. This rise. Like, all that made sense. This sort of alt tempo break thing happening. Like, I liked all of that stuff. But just the times that we spend actually hearing what's happening here breathe. It's not the... It doesn't like it for me. It doesn't feel like it matches up with the rest of the stuff. And though it does seem like that this track's point, honestly, is this incredible loudness in the middle here, mucking around, and that's just what's happening. It's very interesting how hard and how loud all the stuff is, but the things that have the most actual impact are kind of around it, around the drop. The side chain looks fine. The sub is also fine. Like how loud it is ultimately fine. Like if this groove felt awesome to you, then you did a good job. I could hear this being played out at specific festivals and whatnot, and like not a whole lot would be missed about having it. It's just interesting with the perspective that could generate this as a thing. Just because I would have thought, especially given how well I say, but what I mean by that is like this explicitly how this part sounds, how the rise sounds, and how these fill bits sound, make me feel like there should be something different happening in the drop. Although that all the stuff might be happening that way specifically because of what's happening in the drop. It's really hard to tell with these things, which is why I'm conflicted, because I can't really give you advice about that because that's style. I can talk about the mix though. So let's talk about this clipping shenanigan. And you might be thinking to yourself at any point that, wow, well, clipping sounds cool, distortion sounds cool, the burnt up track sounds cool. It's not true for everybody, but lots of people think that. Let's see what that sound was. But it's possible to do that, to make a clack trip, yes, make a track clip like this and burn up and whatever without making it literally clip on the result of the track and when it played on someone else's system. This is important because real clipping isn't as predictable as fake clipping. Fake clipping being when you open up something like a limiter actually and just use the saturation thing on the top there, and now it's I turned off the line so you can't see it, but or you know the saw clipper, the wave shaper actually straight up is basically clipping by default. Where is it? Can I detach it from here? That'd be kind of nice. Nope. It's underneath all this stuff. I don't want to hide my things. All right, well, you know what? Forget it. Point being is you can algorithmically clip things. You can use a clipping algorithm inside a compressor unit or inside a distortion unit or inside whatever, and that's a thing that's happening intentionally according to the process in the audio, versus when you just let a thing clip and it clips, and it's going to do that differently on everything that has it, everything that hears it. And that's the one big main concern, is that how good it sounds to you isn't going to be how good it sounds to anyone else. And not just because they already hear it differently, but because they're going to hear it actually behave differently on different systems. Especially something like this being as up in its face as it is. Other than that, though, those were all just kind of nitpicky stuff to talk about this track, because this track was pretty great. Insofar as being a thing this loud and still working out. And also because that's the point. This is the go hard track, and it goes hard. All right, let's move on to the next song, which I don't know what it is yet. Okay, it's Synark and Meat, Oasis. So, if I'm to understand, this is going to be the polar opposite of that previous track. Just because a person has responded to it and said it was chill. And the other track was not chill. Anyway, here is Synark and Meat, Oasis. Cool. So this guy overall felt kind of sparse. Obviously, a certain amount of minimalistness is a style and certainly fine musically, but when moments like this happen, where we have a breakdown from kind of a lot into what sounds like that sounds like what a stem sounds like when you get a pack of stems from a track, but you play it by itself. It has, and you're like, oh hey, that sounded like there should be like 5 other things happening right there, but that turns out that was other things doing that, not that one stem. Oh boy, that's what it seems like to me. That there's just it feels like there actually is totally supposed to be something behind this, being part of this beat, and like I would have settled for just like a pad or an ARP at least. I mean, that's what I do. I do ARPs. That's my go-to background filler. And background filler is pretty much my big problem with this, is that it feels way too empty. Especially when it gets to these bits. Like, this drop was cool. This drop. All the way over here. Oh, I had to check if we could tell. Yeah, anyway, drop was great. I like the drop a lot, but what was weird about the drop is how forceful it was in the sound design into how empty it was around it. Like this sound, that's a lot, but like negative space can be useful. I just don't think it could be a whole part. You know what I mean? But anyway, all the ultimate recommendation about this track, recommendation about this track is that you fill up a bit. Its loudness is about right. Its hit is about right, and the sidechaining is all pretty well on point. It's pretty interesting how cleanly it all mixes together. Arrangement wise, also, I think it'll feel a little bit better when there's some more just smeary nonsense in the background, some kind of chords, arps, noise, what have you. Especially in moments like these when like that needed some like spinny stuff happening like behind the kicks when the kicks hit instead of just the kicks being by themselves. Like you even do a little bit of it, kind of things. And then there's this whole section. Like this part of the song sounds like it wants to be basically a whole different part of the song from this guy, which I guess is fine. I definitely used to write songs like that. I do, however, just want to point out that that's kind of how it struck me. I don't really know how you wanted it to strike people, but that's how it struck me. Anyway, otherwise, pretty great. The mix is rather on. The compression timing is okay, but I noticed that you're not very loud overall. And that's fine. You don't need to be loud. In fact, like for not being so crushingly perfectly loud, these sections that are work wonders. So like that's all pretty great. So I trust in your ability to do more or less what you want to do with your mixes. I just would recommend doing a little bit, like having more things in there to perhaps challenge how hard it is for you to put them together. If that made sense. I hope that made sense. Some of those words weren't words. All right, this track is from Kaminari Night. Unkai feat Hatsune Miku. Oh, that's cool. I haven't heard a Hatsune track in forever. Hatsumi. What's her name? Hatsune. Okay. That's the one who studied in New York. Here we go. Unkai feat Hatsune Miku by Kaminari Night. Starting way in the middle. Well, now I know what it's going to sound like. Great. Okay, well, here we go.
遥か前に僕が見たあの景色を思い出すんだ。その時まであんな自由僕が感じたこともなかった。雲海の下にある後悔なんて届かない雲海の美しさを僕は忘れ こともない君の残像あったことがある気がする君のことは知らないけどなぜかそばにいなくて寂しすぎる幾年経って目が覚めてあの場所へ歩き出すんだその場所まで運んだ哀れなぜかうまく癒されなかった僕は答えを探し続けている迷いの果てには何かが絶対あるからずっと諦めるわけにはいけない
A loop point. So this was cool. I like that a lot. I was a big fan of the drum and the bass. I'm obviously a big proponent of such things. So though, this part, when we were building up to this, I was thinking to myself, okay, there's not a lot of high frequency presence on Hatsune here. I would have, if I were doing this, I would have put some more, you basically did it, like reverb and delay and whatnot, but I just would have made it slightly more present. I might have even layered some, like harmonies, not necessarily to make them more musical, but to actually make that be what's making us have high frequency presence, to turn them down enough so they don't affect the mix. But it all made sense when I heard that voice in the drop when we got about here. Then that mix started to make pretty good sense. Like, oh, that's why we're rolling back off on the high frequency information there, because wow. So I will say, this drop mix is pretty phenomenal. The thing about it that's bugging me is this. This is so low. Actually, like, I'm pretty sure it's low. I don't really know how low that is. Let's see if we can tell me from here. Is this G below, like G below E? Or is that like B or A or something? Or it's D, isn't it? A D, something like that. But, cause like when we get up here, right? You hear this bit? Like that's kind of the main bass that we're given most of the times is kind of action. But I didn't also feel that there. But then we go down, and it gets a. I need the following on for when I do the thing, but I can't have it on while I'm doing this because every time you stop, it goes back to the beginning instead of it play like it does in regular FL. There might be a setting for that somewhere. I just haven't turned on. But the point I was making is that this sounds away. In fact, there's this kind of snappy thing happening in here that kind of sounds like when, I guess, one of the bass notes is either staccatoing really hard or not, or turning off or something. But because of how low this is, it's interacting with its oscillation in a way that makes it feel like it's off time. So like, even though technically all of those actuation moments were all kind of linked and stuck together, it made it because of how low this oscillation is. It makes it feel like it's like whipping out of time, which is a real shame considering how well defined this sections are. Like these sections, like that's just awesome. And this is still awesome, to be perfectly honest. Like it's just not as rad as how the rest of it goes. Versus, of course, later when we do all we do the different like articulations and groove and things. So in these moments, those snappy bits actually worked out because we were very forcibly enforcing the beat with a kick, which is sidechaining the shit out of that bass and is making sure that it doesn't matter what the bass thinks it's doing at the end or beginning of a beat. There's an ending and a beginning of the beat. That isn't it. That's helping these sections kind of a lot. And ultimately, it does still make more sense that's why there's not as much Hatsune high frequency going, but I would still think there needs to be some, like, especially during, even during these parts. See, if you look at the scope up here, you can see the kick happen, you can see the snare happen, and you can see Hatsune's, like, fundamental area happening. That's level. That's up there. That's loud. That's pretty loud for a voice. And we maybe can do that because it's synthetic. But the reason that Big Pound's an issue about balance is because when we hear Hatsune's voice here, we are only really hearing this bit because everything else about it that's high frequency and reverbing and whatever sounds like it's actually part of the sounds in the background. The drums, the bride's hats, the bass sounds and whatnot, effects and things. Versus when we're out and like by itself, we can very, very specifically tell like what's happening above it. And here, when it gets on with a full drop, we basically disassociate all those frequencies with it and only hear this middle bit, which makes it sound like we're low passing your voice. And it's obviously not going to be an easy job mixing to try and bump up high frequency presence on something that might not even have that much. Harmonies were also my choice because if the fundamentals are going to be this present, you might as well have a couple of them up here too, right? That's part of that action. Outside of that, nothing really wrong about this track. The timing and the organizing and all that, this is all very specifically and good. So good job that. I dug this sequency kind of filter thing going on. Like, nothing terribly complicated or hard about that, but it is interesting to see what that looks like in a spectrum like this. Like, oh, that very rigid, sharp tone, as it turns out, looks pretty rigid and sharp. Go freaking figure. All right. Moving on. Not muting myself. Henri Vo, Dreams. No idea what this is going to sound like. Let's find out. Turn on the follow. Okay. Ooh, piano. Oh, cool. So this was a lot more. This is definitely much more commercial than most things I tend to encounter here. I call it commercial, but it honestly needs stuff. And by stuff, I mean a lead instrument is the principal thing. And a lead instrument can either, in this case, be some kind of synth lead or something, or it could be a vocal. Like this section is, this is like, songs really only do this to let there be space for the other thing to do their thing by themselves, like, or to have that negative space there, but usually not to have the negative space the whole time. This just sounds like it might have even been made for vocals. Like, I wonder if it was. Also, I guess you got a lot of your samples from some stuff, but what is up with this? Because this is a wave file, and when the main bits are happening, it goes all the way up on there, but when in the background and the breakdown, we can actually see pretty plainly that there's a bit of this, like, so like whatever sample you got that is this noise that you have doesn't go all the way up. It's kind of interesting that that's the case, but sonically it doesn't matter much. Like, it's not like we could tell necessarily without looking at this kind of thing. So though, let's talk about some of the things that are in here. So like, there's like a party or something happening out here. We can hear like fireworks and some kind of walking around. And then there's like Nintendo samples and things like that. And that's fine, but this bit can be kind of a problem if you're ever going to look for your thing to want it. If you want your thing to be like used for stuff, I would have another version of this. I would have a version of it that is this the way you want it to be. Or I would like make a video with it that had those sound effects in it. Because then if you did want to make a video with this song and there were effects in it like that dictates some ways it can be used and mostly ways that it can't. So that, but that if that's not something you care about, then whatever. Like, none of that needs to be a consideration if it wasn't, because it didn't impact the song any kind of negatively. It was kind of neat actually, and wholesome and cool feeling. Made me feel all like a party, right? And pretty things like this should totally do that. So cool. Good job on that track. Oh, I'm not a big fan of this kick, especially when you hear it like too many times, like in a row. It doesn't sound great, especially immediately after this like section having this like pretty fantastic sounding like fill moment with enough of the like drums that drums should be doing what drums should be doing, versus, you know what I mean? Although this section's kind of camp is that it does sound kind of like fakey, like that snare being involved. The snare is fine, that sounds perfect because it sounds like that kind of like backyardy sort of drum kit thing, which is perfect for this song. Thematically on point. It's just like this kick is a little too far in that direction versus how it is in the rest of the track. So this section, these sections also were cool, and this is a big reason why I'm pushing for like a lead being a thing in here. Because it's not like I would want the chords themselves to be more complicated. It's just that I can't hear them like this that many times in a row with there be nothing on them. In a way that makes me feel like it could still be like that. I hope that made sense. Okay. Good jobs. Moving on. Electron. Clouds. The artist name is Electron. The song name is Clouds. Which is funny because it could have also been Electron Clouds. Okay. Let's hear what this sounds like. I'm curious because I don't know. Good start. interesting. I was a really big fan of this like musical kind of increase. I liked seeing the phaser in the background. Like, you hear that? That's what that sounds like. Anyway, this got interesting, and I'm trying to formulate how I want to describe some of these sounds, because the main issue I got with it is how dark it is, how not very heavy on the high frequencies, but quite heavy on everything else it is. It makes it actually feel muddier than it is, because it felt muddy. Like when this section happened, I was already like, wow, okay, well, I need to like talk about the hits on this. But when I actually started like listening to it further and trying to figure out precisely how it was not doing it, I'm like, I'm having a hard time, because it is actually doing it. It's just that where the weight is makes me feel like it's flipping up a bit more than it actually is. But there are a lot of these sounds that have a lot more bass presence than they need to versus the sub that's there. And then later on, the sub does stuff that's just nuts. We're perfectly honest. Like up here-ish? Like, wow, did you see that? Like, did you put a filter on the sub and whip it around? Or is it just the sub whipping around itself? Either way, that's not even really a bad thing. Like, the sub doing what it's doing is great. It's fine. It can do whatever it does. It's just that if other stuff does anywhere near where the sub is doing it while it's doing it, it's going to make it feel muddy. And some of those gnarlier sounds totally do. And then there's the watery ones. So waterfully, right? Like, I don't even particularly enjoy doing waterfully stuff. Like, I like songs with it in them. But, like, stuff like this kind of rubs me in a gross way, because it just sounds gross. And it's just my brain doing that. It has nothing to do with any kind of opinions on anything. But if I were to do this, I would actually try to be a bit more on the high frequencies about it. Like, and that could just be as simple as distorting this. And I don't necessarily want to just be like, cool, take this and just wreck the whole thing. You could do something like wreck it and then high pass the wreckage so that it's only up there, but this tone is largely still what's up. Because this is a balance deal. It's less that I wanted whatever that tone was to have a counterpart higher than that would make me think that it would make it feel better. It's about that there's this sort of downward push on things that makes it all feel muddier than it, I guess it does or does not need to. That could just be the last few tracks kind of coloring my brain on this, but even out on the big picture, you can see that it's a lot darker on the highs than it isn't. Yes, thanks Edison for taking this bright and dark thing literally. Other than that though, this last drop was awesome. Like, I would have said some things about the musical progression about it if I hadn't heard this part about it, because before this, I kind of like the vague broken nature of like coming out of this drop all kind of loosey-goosey and then re-loosing it all up back into it. And the progression as well sort of played into that, so that was cool. Which is a fun way of actually using arrangement to make rhythmic changes more contextually reasonable, even if they're not like literally reasonable. I hope that made sense. I'm saying a lot of things that like make sense to me when I'm saying them, and I hope they make sense to you when you hear them. Anyway, I would compress this a little faster. Some part of that muddiness is also to do with just how slow it all is being compressed, probably due to how dark it all is. And I might just bump that up a touch, or at least to do that, bump it up when the kick and snare happen. You can just automate it with the kick and snare. It's kind of what I like to do. If you're not sidechaining the sub with the kick, I think you should. In fact, but you look like you might be sidechaining only the sub with the kick, and I think actually I would recommend sidechaining everything a little harder than that. Same thing with the snare. Also, I would layer some higher noise with the snare. I wouldn't completely get rid of this filtered kind of up-down thing, but I do want there to be a slightly more like hit presence, and it basically gets low passed. And like there can still be a psh while it goes pew, and you'll still hear the pew. So it's not that dangerous to do that kind of thing. Yeah, cool. This is really very creative though. And I would like to see how far this kind of thing can go. So keep doing your thing there. This track is called Slow Burn by Counterwav. Let's see what this one sounds like. Stop starting in the middle. well, I hope that's an intro to a new track or something, like an EP or whatever, because I love that stuff. I like it when the tracks interact with each other like that. This one's got an interesting progression issue, which is that it has an interesting progression, but it only exists here. And the rest, wow, the rest of the track is very bare. It's very switching out. Like, it's like a very, very long DJ intro, you know? I would love, like, when I recommend people begin by writing their main sections of songs first, you could take this sort of thing and be like, cool, I'll have this B part progression kind of like foreshadow it in here somewhere, and during these like empty moments, because there were a lot of empty moments. How long is this track? How long did we get to here? About 3 minutes. Okay, this could be like twice this long. You probably knew that, but it also doesn't need to be that long. Like, it could be this long just fine. This actually works out pretty all right. It's just that the sparseness of this build-up could be less, or the build-up itself could be less, or there could be more things in it. It could be more. Either way, it's the same thing twice. I just said. I liked the kick. The kick mix is awesome. Like, how the kick fits in with all the stuff is great. This snare, however, its metallic ring is too high. And it's too loud, rather. It's not. It's fine frequency-wise. Like, the sound itself is all right. It's just way too loud. Because I can hear that over everything, and I don't just mean like I can hear it. I mean like it is. I can hear it being louder than everything. Like, I would want to hear like the fundy part of this snare some more, like that snappy doo kind of in there. And like, this guy needs to be there too. Like, it's a fun sound and a nice texture, but it just doesn't need to be that high. It made more sense when we started to hear it in context. But even getting used to it by the time I got there wasn't enough for it to feel like it was a reasonable level. Only around here did it start to feel like it was reasonable, but even then it was too high. Because most of the content isn't hard enough to like drown out that kind of snare. And its particular kind of harmonic quality is way too unique to be heard that repetitively that loud, in my mind. It doesn't meet the ratios required to do this to it. Other than that, great song and good job. This track is called Heatwave by Chi. Let's see what this sounds like. Every time. And it's because I leave the cursor there when I'm working on other stuff. Well, that kicked ass. I love this stuff. This is a dope ass track. So though, it does get a little long in the tooth. So this drop is awesome. Like this whole build up is awesome. Everything about this is great. The mix is also great. This is a wonderful balance between the high frequency power and also caring about ear fatigue. So you can see we talk about the roll off a lot on things like this, right? And you can actually see it physically happening here, where like the highest of the high frequencies go away faster than like as it does when it goes lower. There's a certain amount of like push in there, and then it goes, and that's what this sort of kind of thing looks like in there. It doesn't have to be a solid, full-on length white noise deal. It can straight up like carve off a bit and still feel the same because that's just our ears can work like that. Versus when you see something like a hat or whatever that is a little bit weighted differently or evenly. Anyway. This drop, though, like we can see this spread, and it's the same the whole time. And we don't get a difference to it until this happens. And it's barely a difference. Groove-wise, it's not like it needs to change a lot. It is pretty great, but given that there is nothing for it to be on top of it, it's while we're hearing, it's got to change at least a little bit. And the changes can be very slight. They don't need to be, I don't need to hear like 11 new sounds and 16 new fills and that kind of thing. Like it could seriously just have been like this holes over here. These holes are spread out a little bit differently. There's a kind of a fill that happens. Like there's not a lot of variation in the drums either, so there's potential there too. So it's not like you're going to need to put in like as much work as you did to do this to make it correct. Well, correct in my mind, about the right amount of variation. I would have even done like taking the slight variation on this and just make this like a every other thing kind of thing. Because if you make enough of a switch and the groove is also just fine enough on its own, you can just switch back and forth between 2 or 3 things and it'll still feel like they're all fresh, even though they're not. That's pretty much the only suggestion I have about improvements about this track, because everything else about it is more or less like flawless in terms of execution. This whole section in the middle also got kind of long, just because of how little like do, like you can see it, and I hope when you look at these things kind of like this, a sort of bird's eye visual, like it becomes pretty clear how some things are pretty freaking repetitive. And repetition is not the enemy, obviously. This is part of what a lot of things, like, sound good. But to a certain extent, like, it's more like a question of can a thing sound better? If this were background music in a game or something, or a movie, or any other kind of application that would have any kind of background music, this would be perfect. Precisely because it isn't, like, it's not gonna grab attention away from something. Unfortunately, if this was designed to be something that someone focuses on, like a piece of music and people listening to it, then their attention is gonna wander because it's like they got it when they get about to hear, and then everything after that is just more of the same, with the minor adjustments and fills and whatnot, and then there's a breakdown, and then there's more of the same. If I were playing some games listening to this would be a part of my like kick-ass soundtrack that I just kind of have rolling on in the background all the time. But I probably wouldn't choose to listen to this if I were trying to find like a dank track to listen to for a second. So it depends on your goals about how you would like to proceed with something like this. Even if you didn't necessarily want to do anything to this track, it could be good advice for things in the future. Let's see. Okay, that appears to be what I am doing today. This has been the viewer track reviews. If you'd like to have your track submitted, head on over to the Discord channel where there is the submission channel, and there's rules there to back it up so that you can see what you need to do it right. And thanks to our mods for helping to clean up file discrepancies and that kind of thing, which makes it a little bit harder for these to do. It's a lot easier doing it with the help that I have from my Discord peeps. So thanks, y'all. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.